start our walk. So we're really right here at the foot of Wall Street. And like I said, Wall Street's only 8 blocks long, so this won't be a particularly long walk as far as the distance, but it is absolutely crammed with history in those 8 blocks. Wall Street today is probably one of the most recognized street names in New York City, and it has definitely become synonymous with American finance. Well, there's a lot more to it than just finance, though that's certainly a part of it as well. There's also a lot of early US government history, some Dutch New Amsterdam history, and we'll be talking about all of that just as soon as this car goes by. All right. So the name Wall Street, which like I said is so very recognizable, was actually taken from a literal wall. Sometimes very literal with street names here in New York City. Back when New York was New Amsterdam, there was a fortification wall built along the north edge of the colony of New Amsterdam. This was in the 1650s, although there is some speculation that maybe there was an earlier version of at least a wooden fence in this spot right along this stretch as early as the 1640s. So this wall stayed in place even after New Amsterdam became New York, until the wall was finally torn down in 1699 to make way for some new development. So even though there is no wall, there are some markers to show where the wall would have been, and the name Wall Street has stuck. So walking right now, just coming up to Front Street. So actually these first couple streets that we're going to pass wouldn't have been as far over as that wall went, for one very simple reason: these were not streets back then. This is actually a part of Manhattan that has been filled out and is not a part of the original shoreline. So we're going to be coming up on the original shoreline here in just a moment. But Front Street and Water Street would have been later additions to this area. So you can see, this is certainly the more modern looking part of Wall Street as well. So as we head up towards Pearl Street, which is the next block up, that would have actually been the original shoreline of Manhattan. So Pearl Street got its name in kind of an unusual way. It was actually from shells that used to gather along the shoreline. New York had one of the world's largest oyster beds out there in New York Harbor, and so piles of oyster shells with their pearly interiors would end up piled along the shoreline, leading to the name Pearl Street. And so Pearl Street would have originally been more of the waterfront area, and that would have been a really important area in the colony of New Amsterdam, the Dutch colony that was founded in the 1620s. That was really a site of a lot of major activity in New Amsterdam, including the tavern where their city hall used to be. There were a couple of taverns there on Pearl Street, but there was one in particular that was used as the de facto city hall for the colony of New Amsterdam. So here we are coming up on Pearl Street right now. And I'll give you a quick look down Pearl Street as well, just so you can see a little bit of it, even though we're mostly focusing on Wall Street. So there's a quick look down Pearl. So something you're going to notice is down in this part of Manhattan, we have some relatively funky intersections. Stuff doesn't always line up quite as nicely as it does in Midtown. This part of Manhattan Island, the southern tip of the island, is well south of where the grid of Manhattan is. So stuff gets a lot neater as you get further north. Now in this stretch of Wall Street here, in the early days, right here at the foot of Wall Street, the original foot of Wall Street, just past Pearl, there would have originally been a group of men gathering here pretty often underneath a buttonwood tree. So a buttonwood tree is a type of sycamore tree, and these people would gather here almost every single weekday and they were securities traders. And these traders would meet almost daily under this buttonwood tree. And securities trading existed really early on in the United States. Actually, in the early days, most of what they were trading were US government issued war bonds. So after the American Revolution, the federal government actually consolidated all of the war debt from all of the original 13 colonies. And so they issued government war bonds that could then be traded on these securities markets. But this was all done in a pretty disorganized fashion at first, until here on this stretch, these traders started to meet up. And in 1792, 24 of them signed what they called the Buttonwood Agreement in honor of that buttonwood tree. And the Buttonwood Agreement was essentially the foundation of the New York Stock Exchange, the largest exchange in the world today by dollar value of the companies listed. It was officially started by 24 people who used to hang out under a buttonwood tree. And the rules of the Buttonwood Agreement were pretty simple, honestly. It said that these traders would have a set commission that they would charge, and that they would give priority to one another, the signatories of this agreement. And it's not to say that you had to be a signatory to this agreement to do securities trading, but you didn't get those same preferences. You didn't get that commission. You didn't get that preferential sale. And so this was the foundation of organized trading here in Lower Manhattan. Organized trading existed, by the way, already. They'd been doing this in Europe, and actually 2 years earlier, an organized market had been created in Philadelphia. Now we're here at 48 Wall Street. You can see this beautiful 1920s fabulous Art Deco building. So 48 Wall Street was once the home of Bank of New York. You can see Bank of New York building here. Now this is actually the third Bank of New York building to be on this site, because like I said, this was built in the 1920s, and as you'll see right here, Bank of New York was founded in 1784 by none other than Alexander Hamilton. Alexander Hamilton, first Secretary of the US Treasury, star of a fantastic Broadway musical. That Alexander Hamilton founded Bank of New York here. Like I said, this is their third building to be here on this spot. I'm actually just going to duck across the street here so that I can give you a look at the building. So I know there's a little bit of scaffolding over there. But here's a look at that Bank of New York building. Bank of New York is no longer in this location, and actually for a little while this building was being used as the Museum of American Finance, which is a really cool thing to visit. So we're going to be heading right here. We're at Wall and William Street, if you can see over there, and we're going to be heading next over towards 40 Wall Street, a building with a really fascinating history. So 40 Wall Street, you can actually see it's the one up ahead to the right, two flagpoles out front, but we'll go and get a better look at it here in a minute. 40 Wall Street was originally started in 1929, and it was being built for Bank of Manhattan. And this was an interesting time in New York's history, because this era became known as the Great Skyscraper Race. There were multiple buildings that were being constructed in New York City that were all trying to become the tallest building in the world, and Bank of Manhattan was certainly one of them here at 40 Wall Street. So this was actually being built at exactly the same time as the Chrysler Building up on 42nd Street. And according to the original designs, they were going to be a pretty similar height, really just a couple of feet difference. And so H. Craig Severance, the architect of this building, designed this to be just a little bit taller than the planned roof line of the Chrysler Building. So this one topped out at 927 feet. The roof line of the Chrysler Building was 925 feet. So this won by 2 feet. This was the tallest building in the world. But what H. Craig Severance didn't know is that William Van Allen, the architect of the Chrysler Building, had gotten approval for a big shiny steel spire that was going to go on the top of the Chrysler Building. It was being constructed secretly inside the crown of the building. The spire went up, and the Chrysler Building was 1,046 feet. and it was the tallest building in the world, not 40 Wall Street. Now, there was a lot of conversation afterwards about what really constituted height in a building. You know, does something like a spire count, or was it about the roof line or the number of usable floors? And on both counts, 40 Wall Street actually would have won. This conversation went back and forth for about 11 months. And then the Empire State Building was finished, and it sort of ended the conversation because it was taller than both of them. So there is a plaque detailing a little bit of the information for 40 Wall Street. And I don't know if you can tell, but I'll try to step back again and see if I can give you a look. This building features something that was really common in the era called setbacks. So setbacks are being referred to, those are those pieces. You can see this building actually gets narrower as it gets up towards the top. It has kind of a tiered shape. It's really common at the time in this era. A lot of people just think it was popular at the time. It was actually because of a zoning law that had been passed in New York in 1916, saying that the top of a building could be no larger than 1/4 of the base, and it was to let sunlight filter through. So it became a very popular design style, but that's actually why it got started. So Bank of Manhattan, who built 40 Wall Street, actually does technically still exist to this day. And so I'm going to walk back here to show you something really cool. Bank of Manhattan ended up merging with Chase Bank to become Chase Manhattan Bank. But Bank of Manhattan was originally founded in the early 1800s by Aaron Burr. If you are a fan of the musical Hamilton, yes, that Aaron Burr, rival to Alexander Hamilton. And actually, he said the reason he was building Bank of Manhattan was to fund a project to build water pipes to bring clean water into New York City. But the real reason was Alexander Hamilton had founded Bank of New York in the 1780s, and he had a monopoly on banking. And so Aaron Burr wanted to build a competitor. But the legacy of Bank of Manhattan is still here to this day in the Chase logo. It looks like just kind of a regular geometric figure, but it is actually a stylized drawing of the original wooden water pipes that were the Bank of Manhattan's first project that they financed, done by Aaron Burr. So you can see it every single day if you pass a Chase Bank, or if you have a credit card with a Chase Bank, you can think about Bank of Manhattan. So we're gonna carry on down Wall Street, getting to one of the most noteworthy corners in the area. There's just a lot going on at this one corner. So we'll have a lot to talk about here coming up. We're heading up to Wall Street and Broad Street. But something I do want to show you here in just a minute is if you're walking down this section of Wall Street, you can actually see it is closed off to cars. So you can walk right down the middle, which is really nice. And here in the sidewalk, just every few feet, you can see these squares of wood set into the ground. So actually for this whole length here, they have a marker, and this is following the path of the original wooden wall that Wall Street is named for. These are not pieces of wood from that original wall. It's just a marker of where that wall would have been. And so coming up here at the corner of Wall and Broad, so what most people associate with this corner is finance. This is the home of the stock exchange. This is the home of the House of Morgan, JP Morgan's bank. But it is also the corner where you can see Federal Hall National Memorial. And unfortunately, they are doing some renovation right now. And so there is some scaffolding up, but you'll still be able to get a good look at it. So when that original wall was taken down in 1699, it was to make way to build a grand city hall here for the British colony of New York. This is where their city hall was. In the early days of the United States, actually under our original Articles of Confederation government, and in the first year or so of the US constitutional government, that City Hall building that had been built by the British in 1700 was actually used as the Congress building for the United States. So even though so many people think about Washington, D.C. in terms of major government actions, right here at the corner of Wall and Broad, albeit not in this building, this is where the Bill of Rights was adopted. This is where our judiciary system was created. this is where George Washington was sworn in as president, was standing up on the balcony of that former City Hall building that was turned into the Capitol building. So you can see a statue of George Washington out front here. See if I can get a little bit closer. It's this giant bronze statue. Apparently, it is marking about the exact height that George Washington would have been at from the street level for his inauguration. And they have some remnants, some artifacts from his inauguration day inside this building, which is closed for renovations right now. But if you come back when this is open, it is absolutely fantastic and so worth a visit inside. So this current building here, which was built in the 1840s, was not built to be Federal Hall National Memorial. That didn't happen until the 20th century. This was actually built to be a customs house. And so there's this beautiful rotunda on the inside, and this is where importers would go in and do their business, was inside this beautiful rotunda. Eventually, because shipping in and out of New York City was so incredibly bustling, they outgrew this for the customs house. They built a new customs house, and this became a branch of the U.S. Sub-Treasury Department. So that was the precursor to the Federal Reserve banking system. And so that meant that there were giant vaults of gold and silver inside this building at one point, right here at the corner of Wall Street and Broad Street. Once the Federal Reserve System was created, that's when this building was decommissioned as a sub-treasury building, and like I said, eventually became Federal Hall. And so you can see some of the flags hanging down there, just detailing a little bit of what they have, but they do have some fantastic exhibits inside. And so like I said, I do really recommend going. And right here on the street, here is the official street plaque that's showing where the Wall Street Palisade, or the Wall, would have been, and detailing when that would have been. So 1653 is when the official big fortified wall was, and you still see some of these markers here. So I'm going to cross this way so I can show you just a little bit of a diagonal, and I also want to give you this view. We'll come back to this, and we'll be finishing at Trinity Church, but Trinity just sort of looms over Wall Street, and it's just always such an impressive view. So this building right across the street from Federal Hall at Wall Street and Broad Street, not very large, certainly not compared to some of the other buildings in this area, but this building was the House of Morgan. J.P. Morgan was one of the undisputed titans of finance in the Gilded Age era, also in the Progressive era, so late 1800s and early 1900s. J.P. Morgan had so much money and so much power that he was able to help pull the U.S. financial system back from a collapse at one point with his personal wealth. So this building here is actually was not finished and open to the public until 1914, but this was the new home of the Morgan Bank. The Morgan Bank had already occupied this corner, but in a building that had been built for someone else. They decided they had outgrown that building. They wanted to commission a new building here on the corner. And so this building here, really by the standards of the day, in the early 1900s, it's a little more understated. It's not quite as ornate as some buildings in that era tended to be. Beaux-Arts style architecture was very, very popular in that time. But it has kind of a very imposing presence. A lot of people say, you know, this building is really the essence of J.P. Morgan himself. And unfortunately, J.P. Morgan himself would have never worked inside this building in his bank, and that's because he actually passed away shortly before it was up and running for business. But make no mistake, he passed away right before this was ready. He absolutely had a hand in every single step of the design, and so this is very much him. So it is considered some of the most prime real estate in Lower Manhattan, and that is largely because right across the street is the big show, the New York Stock Exchange. So we talked about the Buttonwood Agreement. We've certainly come a long way from the humble origins of people meeting underneath a buttonwood tree. After the Buttonwood Agreement was signed, the traders did start to, again, legitimize, organize. Things were done in a kind of carefully constructed way. They didn't actually have their own building for a little while. They started meeting in a coffee house a little further down Wall Street, Tontine's Coffee House. And that was kind of the center of the New York Stock Exchange. But they did move to a building finally on this location in the 1800s. Not this building. This was not built until 1903. So this is a little bit more modern, but it is an absolutely spectacular building. I'll try to get a little closer so you can see the New York Stock Exchange up above here. So interestingly enough, even though the New York Stock Exchange has become absolutely synonymous with Wall Street, this stock exchange building is not technically on Wall Street. I'm actually standing in front of 18 Broad Street right now. Doesn't sound the same. So they also commissioned this building that was considered an addition that is technically a Wall Street address. This building here on the corner, this is part of the New York Stock Exchange as well. But this original stock exchange building here is the one that's 18 Broad Street. It actually used to be a very popular tourist activity for people to go in and walk the floor of the exchange, watch them ring the opening bell or the closing bell. And unfortunately, that's not open to the public anymore. That is a post 9/11 security measure. But you can all just imagine what's going on. So actually, I do want to show this to you as well. It's a little hard to see because it's winter time and there are no leaves, but here on Wall Street, there's this one, or on Broad Street, sorry, right in front of the exchange, there's this one lone little tree right in front of the New York Stock Exchange. It's a buttonwood tree. It's not the original buttonwood tree, but it's here in honor of the Buttonwood Agreement, the foundation, the base block of the New York Stock Exchange. So to this day, there is a buttonwood tree in honor of the Buttonwood Agreement here. So you can see right over there, the 18 Broad Street address and Stock Exchange just above it. So when the New York Stock Exchange was created by way of the Buttonwood Agreement, and when it started to become organized, and then eventually moved into Tontine's Coffee House, and then into the actual Stock Exchange building, a lot of people joined up with that and made that move. But not everybody, not all securities traders decided to move into this building. There was a very active outdoor market that happened every single day, every single weekday. So this is a marker here. It says 1873. This is describing the raucous curb market gathers daily at Exchange Place. And so this is unlisted securities, things that are not listed with the New York Stock Exchange, and they were traded at this outdoor market. And this was a very raucous, lively market. It gathered out here on the street, and they would gesture to people in the windows of nearby buildings, and they would make trades between the street and these windows. This moved inside officially in 1921, moved to a building a couple of blocks away. It became the American Stock Exchange. But initially, there was the curb market right out here in front of the New York Stock Exchange. And I do want to show you a picture that they have here, because you've probably heard of ticker tape parades in New York City, these fabulous parades that we throw if there's a really important visitor or if a sports team wins a championship. But ticker tape is actually a Wall Street thing from the stock exchange. This is a ticker tape machine. That yellow tape, that piece of paper, is ticker tape. And it was invented in 1867, and this communicated changes in stock prices, and it meant that anytime a price changed, anybody anywhere in the city with one of these tickers would get that news at exactly the same time. And this really revolutionized everything. And then the day the Statue of Liberty was dedicated in 1886, some people threw used ticker tape out the window, and we started the tradition of ticker tape parades, which is a fantastic one. Now, this is a newer addition to the area, but has become very highly visited and very well loved. This is the Fearless Girl, and this was commissioned in 2017 by an assets management group, and it was in honor of International Women's Day, kind of encouraging some of these institutions to think about women in boardrooms and leadership roles. And so it was commissioned and placed here, but actually not initially right in this spot. For a little while, this fearless girl was staring down the face of the Charging Bull statue, which has ties to this street here, though it is not here anymore. It's down at Broadway near Bowling Green. But the Charging Bull statue was created by a man named Arturo Demodica, and it was in response to the stock market, the recession of 1987. Demodica created this giant bronze bull in honor of a bull market, and it was placed actually initially right here in front of the New York Stock Exchange in December of 1989 as a holiday present for New York City. This was illegal. It had not been commissioned by the government, by the exchange, any of those things. So the bull was impounded. There was outcry after this bull was impounded and taken away, and so they moved it to its present location. But essentially, it was illegal artwork. And so that was why it was kind of funny when this fearless girl was placed staring down the bull. Arturo Demodica complained. He didn't like that. He felt it altered the nature of his work when he had done something very, very similar back in the 1980s. And so this girl actually ended up where Demodica wanted his bull, and now they're separated. But a lot of people come and visit her every single day. So we're going to make our way back up to Wall Street. We had to make this ups and downs, and not all of them are financial, though certainly there have been those. The stock market crash of 1929, multiple financial recessions, but there was even in September of 1920 an act of domestic terrorism right here at the corner of Wall and Broad Street. In September of 1920, just a little bit after, a minute or so after noon, a horse-drawn wagon was pulled up here. It had 100 pounds of dynamite and 500 pounds of iron sash weights. When this detonated, it was an absolutely massive blast. It broke the windows of the New York Stock Exchange, of the House of Morgan right here on the corner. This killed nearly 40 people. Hundreds more were injured. And this was considered an act of terrorism. Trading was suspended on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange about 1 minute later, and they did close the market, although they did reopen the next morning. The stock exchange has remained closed for days at a time in the past, but not this particular time. The House of Morgan here sustained absolutely massive damage to the building. They really got a fair amount of the blast, and they certainly repaired the inside of the building. They had to in order to be able to reopen, but they didn't repair the outside. So I want to show you something that you can still see to this day here. Here on the side of this building, you see some gouges taken out of the side here. That's not wear and tear from, the building being here for over 100 years. That is actually from that 1920 bomb blast. And they didn't not repair the outside because they couldn't afford it or anything like that. They certainly could. They actually said they didn't repair it as an act of defiance to whoever had placed this bomb. They said, you know what, we're still here. And as far as who did place that bomb, they don't really know because nobody ever really claimed credit for it. And there was an absolutely mad dash by the city to come and clean up the blast site so that business could resume the next morning. Unfortunately, in the haste to clean up the site and make it ready for people to come to work, they probably also ended up destroying a fair amount of physical evidence that possibly could have helped, although maybe not. But either way, the House of Morgan continued, the New York Stock Exchange continued, Wall Street continued. And down at the end of the street, another looming constant in this area, and that is the beautiful, stately Trinity Church. So Trinity Church has been a part of New York City since 1697, back when we were a British colony. This building is not from 1697. This is actually the third Trinity Church to be on this spot. The first Trinity Church burned down in a fire in 1776. There was a massive fire at the onset of the American Revolution, destroyed somewhere between 400 and 500 buildings in New York City. So not just Trinity, but Trinity included. The second Trinity Church that was built on this site would have actually been the Trinity Church that George Washington and other members of his government would have attended. And that one had to be torn down in the 1830s. It had become weakened and damaged after some very heavy winters and some harsh snowstorms. So this one, this Trinity Church number 3, was done in the 1840s. The architect was a man named Richard Upjohn. It was done in the neo-Gothic style, and it is just a really beautiful building. It's also kind of notable because a lot of churches that were done in the neo-Gothic style, especially in that era, were done with marble, limestone. This is brownstone. Brownstone is a little bit more malleable stone. It's also very commonly found in buildings here in New York City, but it made it so that they could do just incredibly impressive detail work. So I want to give you a look here, some of the detailing. And actually, I'll see if I can squeeze in a little bit. If you can see those iron doors, those big bronze doors in there, those were a gift of the Astor family. The Astor family were members of Trinity Church, as many generations of prominent New Yorkers have been. Trinity Church here is also home to the Trinity Church Cemetery. They have this blocked off right now, but I will walk around to the side so that you can see something. I had mentioned lots of prominent New Yorkers were members of Trinity Church, and that is certainly true. But 2 very famous and prominent New Yorkers are buried down here at this end of Trinity Church Cemetery, and they're actually right next to one another. So I'll see if I can give you a quick look at those markers before we head back to the corner of Wall and Broad and finish up our walk. But one of those was Robert Fulton. Robert Fulton sort of dramatically changed how New York operated, New York and Brooklyn. Robert Fulton was the creator of the steamship ferry, and that launched ferry service between New York and Brooklyn and connected those cities really for the first time. So that's Robert Fulton's marker there. And just over here, this white pyramid-shaped marker, Alexander Hamilton, like I said, first Secretary of the U.S. Treasury. He was a member of Trinity Church. He is buried right here in the corner of the churchyard. This is actually also, although their markers are smaller and closer to the ground, that's where the rest of his family is buried as well as many other names that you might recognize if you were a fan of the musical Hamilton. So we'll head right back over here, like I said, to the corner so we can finish up in front of Trinity. But hopefully you have enjoyed our walk down Wall Street. It is just a really fascinating part of the city. There is so much history here. Oh, something I want to show you really quick before we do finish. If you're on this stretch of Broadway here in Lower Manhattan, you'll see all of these dark gray stripes set into the sidewalk. I showed you the picture of the tickers, the Wall Street tickers, and told you we have ticker tape parades. Every single one of these is marking a specific ticker tape parade. It will have the date of the parade, it'll have who it was held for. So you can start all the way at the foot of Broadway there at the tip of Manhattan, and you can do this whole walk through New York's history by way of our ticker tape parades if you have a little time. It is definitely worth doing. There's some really interesting names and definitely some names you are going to recognize there along, we call this the Canyon of Heroes. So thank you so much for joining